The morning sun filtered through the blinds of apartment 4B as Marcus Chun tied his work boots with practiced efficiency. 8 years old and still in her pajamas, Lily sat at their small kitchen table, carefully drawing flowers in her coloring book with the same precision her father brought to everything. Marcus glanced at his daughter, her dark hair falling across her face as she concentrated. Every morning started the same way since Sarah had passed 2 years ago. Quiet, methodical, safe. Daddy misses. Peterson's sink is making that funny noise again, Lily said without looking up from her drawing. Marcus smiled and ruffled her hair. I know, sweetheart. I'll fix it after I drop you at school. As the maintenance supervisor for Maple Grove Apartments, Marcus knew every pipe, every electrical outlet, every squeaky door in the complex. The residents trusted him completely, often leaving spare keys and calling him at all hours. He didn't mind. It kept his hands busy and his mind focused on something other than the emptiness that still echoed in their small apartment. After walking Lily to the bus stop, Marcus returned to find 3 men in expensive suits standing near the complex entrance, clipboards in hand, surveying the property with critical eyes. Something about their posture, their too-clean appearance, made his old instincts stir. The 3 men approached Marcus as he unlocked his maintenance shed. The leader, a tall man with slick-back hair and a gold watch that caught the sunlight, extended a business card. Good morning. I'm Richard Blackwood from Suburban Property Management Solutions. We're conducting compliance inspections for the new HOA regulations in this district. Marcus studied the card. Something felt off about the glossy paper, the generic logo. I wasn't aware we had an HOA here. This is a rental complex. Blackwood's smile never wavered. Recent municipal changes, my friend. All residential properties now fall under association guidelines. We're here to help residents avoid costly violations. The second man, shorter with nervous eyes, was already taking photos of the building's exterior, focusing on minor wear spots and small maintenance issues that Marcus had scheduled for next month. What kind of violations? Marcus asked, his voice carefully neutral. Oh, the usual. Landscaping standards, exterior maintenance requirements, vehicle registration compliance. Nothing too serious if addressed promptly. Blackwood's tone carried an implied threat. We'll need to schedule individual unit inspections soon. Marcus watched them work, cataloging their movements, their equipment, their behavior patterns. 20 years in the Navy had taught him to assess potential threats. These men weren't official inspectors. Before we dive deeper into this story, drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe you've dealt with HOA issues where you live. Over the next 3 days, Marcus watched the fake HOA team systematically target the most vulnerable residents. They started with Mrs. Patterson and an elderly widow on a fixed income who lived alone with her 2 cats. Marcus was replacing a hallway light fixture when he heard raised voices through a thin door. Blackwood's smooth tone had taken on a sharper edge. Ma'am, unauthorized pets constitute a serious violation. The fine is $300, payable immediately, or we'll have to schedule removal. Mrs. Patterson's voice shook. But I've had whiskers and mittens for 5 years. Nobody ever said anything about pets. New regulations, I'm afraid. Cash or money order only. Marcus's jaw tightened. He knocked gently on Mrs. Patterson's door. Everything okay in there? The door opened to reveal Mrs. Patterson's tear-streaked face. Behind her, Blackwood stood with his clipboard, the nervous photographer still snapping pictures of her modest living room. Oh, Marcus, they say I have to pay $300 or they'll take my cats away. Marcus stepped into the doorway, his presence filling the space. Mrs. Patterson, why don't you let me handle this? Could you go check your mailbox? After she left, Marcus turned to face the 3 men. I think there's been a misunderstanding. This complex has always allowed pets with deposits. Blackwood's smile returned, but colder now. And you are? Marcus Chun, maintenance supervisor. Been here 4 years. Well, Marcus, maybe it's time you learned about the new reality. That evening, Marcus sat at his kitchen table with his laptop, researching while Lily worked on her homework beside him. He'd spent an hour on the phone with the city planning office, the county clerk, and a state HOA registration database. No record of suburban property management solutions existed anywhere. "Daddy, you look worried," Lily said, glancing up from her math problems. "Just checking on something for work, sweetheart." Marcus kept his voice calm, but his mind was racing through possibilities. These weren't legitimate inspectors. They were con artists targeting his neighbors. The next morning brought worse news. Marcus found single mother Jennifer Walsh from 3C crying in the laundry room, clutching a citation demanding $800 for improper balcony storage violations. "They said my daughter's bike and my small patio table are safety hazards," Jennifer explained through tears. $800. "Marcus, I don't have that kind of money. They said if I don't pay by Friday, they'll have us evicted." Marcus examined the official-looking citation. The letterhead was impressive, but the grammar was slightly off in places. "Jennifer, don't pay anything yet. Let me look into this." By afternoon, Marcus had documented pattern. The fake enforcers were systematically working through the complex, targeting single parents, elderly residents, and anyone who seemed intimidated by authority. They'd already collected over $3,000 from frightened tenants who'd paid immediately to avoid trouble. Friday morning arrived with a knock on Marcus's door that made his blood run cold. Lily was eating cereal at the kitchen table when he opened it to find all three fake enforcers standing in the hallway, clipboards ready and cameras positioned. "Mr. Chun, we need to discuss some serious violations we've discovered regarding your unit," Blackwood announced, pushing past Marcus into the apartment. "Excuse me, but you can't just walk into my home," Marcus said, his voice deadly calm. The nervous photographer was already snapping pictures of their modest living room, focusing on Lily's toys scattered near the couch. "Unauthorized recreational equipment storage," he muttered, making notes. Lily looked up from her cereal, confusion and fear flickering across her 80-year-old face. "Daddy, who are these men?" "Just some people who made a mistake, sweetheart. Finish your breakfast." Blackwood consulted his clipboard with theatrical seriousness. "Mr. Chun, we've documented multiple infractions. Unauthorized personal property display, improper window treatments, and unapproved child recreational materials. The combined fines total $1,200. Marcus felt every muscle in his body coil tight. These men had just walked into his home, frightened his daughter, and were attempting to extort money from him using her toys as justification. $1,200, Marcus repeated slowly. "For my daughter's toys and our window blinds. Payable immediately, or we'll have to initiate removal proceedings." The third man, who'd been silent until now, stepped closer to Lily. "Cute kid. Hope she's not too attached to this place." Marcus stepped between the men and his daughter, his posture shifting almost imperceptibly. Years of military training had taught him to read situations, and this one was escalating beyond acceptable parameters. "Gentlemen, I need to ask you to leave my apartment now," Marcus said, his voice carrying a quiet authority that made Lily look up from her cereal bowl. Blackwood laughed, but there was nervousness behind it. "Mr. Chun, you don't seem to understand the gravity of your situation. We have legal authority here." "Show me your credentials," Marcus said calmly. "Official identification, court orders, anything that proves you have the right to be in my home, making demands." The photographer lowered his camera slightly. The third man shifted uncomfortably. Only Blackwood maintained his facade, but Marcus could see sweat beginning to form on his forehead. "We don't need to prove anything to maintenance staff," Blackwood blustered. "Either you pay the fines or face the consequences." Marcus moved closer to Lily's chair, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. "Lily, why don't you go brush your teeth and get your backpack? The school bus will be here soon." As his daughter left the room, Marcus turned back to the three men. The temperature in the apartment seemed to drop several degrees. His voice, when he spoke, carried 20 years of military command experience. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk out of my home right now. You're going to stop harassing my neighbors. And you're going to find a different complex to run your little scam on." Blackwood's face flushed red. "Are you threatening us? Because that will be a very serious mistake." The third man, emboldened by his leader's anger, stepped closer to Marcus. Maybe maintenance boy needs to learn some respect. Marcus remained perfectly still, but something in his eyes changed. The quiet maintenance supervisor was gone, replaced by something harder, more dangerous. I'm giving you one opportunity to leave peacefully. Or what? Blackwood sneered. You'll fix us to death with your little toolbox? That afternoon, after walking Lily to school, Marcus returned to find the three men waiting by his truck in the parking lot. They'd brought reinforcements, 2 additional men who looked like hired muscle. Mr. Chun, Blackwood called out, his voice carrying across the lot. Time for a more serious conversation about your attitude problem. The photographer was recording everything on his phone now. This is all going on record, he said nervously. Official HOA enforcement action. Marcus approached slowly, his hands visible and relaxed at his sides. To anyone watching, he looked like a mild-mannered maintenance worker walking toward a group of aggressive strangers. But something about his gait, his balance, the way he held his shoulders suggested otherwise. Gentlemen, I told you this morning that your business here was finished, Marcus said quietly. One of the hired muscle stepped forward. Old man, you need to learn when to back down. I tried backing down, Marcus replied. But you made one critical error in judgment. What's that? You threatened my daughter, Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. The first hired muscle reached for Marcus's shirt, intending to grab him and establish dominance. What happened next would have been invisible to untrained eyes, but to Marcus, the man's movements were telegraphed and clumsy. Marcus sidestepped with fluid precision, caught the man's wrist, and applied just enough pressure to a specific nerve cluster to send him dropping to his knees with a gasp of pain. The second muscle moved faster, swinging a wild punch that Marcus deflected with his forearm while simultaneously stepping inside the man's reach. A precise strike to the solar plexus left the attacker doubled over, struggling to breathe. The photographer dropped his phone, staring in shock. What the hell? Blackwood was backing away, his face pale. You can't assault HOA officials. We'll have you arrested. Marcus hadn't even broken a sweat. You're not officials. You're con artists running an extortion racket. And you just made the mistake of bringing violence to my home where my 80-year-old daughter lives. The nervous photographer was scrambling for his dropped phone. This is crazy. You attacked us. Actually, Marcus said calmly, helping the first man to his feet with surprising gentleness. I defended myself against an assault. There's a difference. Ask anyone with legal training. Both hired men were looking at Marcus with new understanding. Whatever they'd expected from a maintenance supervisor, it wasn't this level of controlled, professional combat skill. Blackwood's voice shook slightly. This isn't over. Yes, Marcus said quietly. It is. The scammers retreated to their rental van, but Marcus knew this wasn't finished. Men like Blackwood didn't accept defeat easily, and they'd invested too much time in this complex to walk away quietly. That evening, as Marcus helped Lily with her homework, his phone rang. Mrs. Patterson's voice was barely a whisper. Marcus, they're back. They're at Jennifer's apartment with more men. They're saying if she doesn't pay tonight, they're taking her daughter to social services for living in unsafe conditions. Marcus felt ice form in his chest. These men had crossed every line, but threatening to separate a mother from her child was unforgivable. Mrs. Patterson, call 911 and tell them there are men impersonating government officials threatening residents. I'll be right there. He turned to Lily, who was watching him with worried eyes. Sweetheart, I need you to go to Mrs. Peterson next door. Tell her Daddy has to help some neighbors, and I'll be back soon. Marcus walked to apartment 3C with the measured pace of someone who had made a decision. Through the thin walls, he could hear Jennifer sobbing and multiple male voices making threats about child endangerment and immediate removal proceedings. When he knocked, the door opened to reveal 6 men now, including the original 3 plus 3 new faces. Jennifer stood in the corner with her 7-year-old daughter pressed against her side, both of them terrified. Mr. Chun, Blackwood said with false confidence. Perfect timing. We were just explaining to Ms. Walsh here about proper child welfare standards. Marcus stepped into the apartment and quietly closed the door behind him. "Jennifer, take your daughter into the bedroom and close the door," Marcus said calmly, never taking his eyes off the 6 men. "She's not going anywhere until this is resolved," Blackwood snapped. "We have authority here." One of the new men, larger than the others, moved toward Jennifer's daughter. "Kid needs to come with us for a welfare assessment." That was the moment Marcus stopped being a maintenance supervisor and became what he'd been trained to be for 20 years. The movement was so fast that most of the men didn't see it happen. The large man reaching for the child found his arm twisted behind his back and himself face down on the carpet before he could blink. "Nobody touches the children," Marcus said, his voice carrying absolute authority. 2 more men rushed him simultaneously. Marcus sidestepped the first, used his momentum to send him crashing into the kitchen counter, while catching the second with an elbow strike that dropped him instantly. The photographer was frantically trying to record, but his hands were shaking too badly to hold the camera steady. "This is assault. We're documenting everything." Marcus was already moving toward the next threat, each motion precise and economical. Years of Navy SEAL training had taught him exactly how much force was necessary to neutralize without causing permanent damage. Within 90 seconds, all 6 men were either on the floor or backing toward the door, none seriously injured, but all completely incapacitated. "The police are on their way," Marcus said quietly. "I suggest you stay exactly where you are." The police arrived to find 6 men sitting quietly on Jennifer's living room floor, all of them looking dazed and confused. Marcus stood calmly by the window, his hands visible and relaxed, while Jennifer and her daughter emerged from the bedroom. "Officers, these men have been running an extortion scam targeting residents of this complex," Marcus explained, his voice returning to its usual quiet tone. "They've been impersonating HOA officials and threatening families with fake violations." Detective Sarah Rodriguez surveyed the scene with experienced eyes. 6 grown men, all appearing subdued and cooperative. One maintenance supervisor who showed no signs of a fight, and a grateful mother clutching her daughter. "Sir, can you explain how 6 men ended up in this condition?" Rodriguez asked Marcus. "They became aggressive when I asked them to stop threatening this family's child. I defended myself and protected the residents." Blackwood tried to stand, wincing. "Officer, this man attacked us. We're legitimate HOA representatives conducting official business." Rodriguez examined their fake credentials, the fraudulent citations, and the cash they'd collected from other residents. Within an hour, the full scope of their operation was clear. "Mr. Chun," Rodriguez said as the last of the scammers was loaded into police cars, "your neighbors are lucky to have someone like you looking out for them." That was some impressive work. Marcus watched the cars drive away, then turned to Jennifer, who was still holding her daughter tightly. "It's over," he said simply. "They won't be back." The complex owner, David Martinez, arrived just as the scene was clearing. He'd received multiple calls from grateful residents. 2 weeks later, Marcus stood in the complex's community room, surrounded by every resident of Maple Grove Apartments. David Martinez held an official document in his hands, smiling broadly. "Marcus, I've watched you protect this community like it was your own family," Martinez said, "which is why I'm promoting you to head of security with a substantial raise and asking you to help me design safety protocols for all my properties." Mrs. Patterson dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "Marcus saved my cats and probably my life savings." Jennifer stepped forward with her daughter. "He protected us when we had nowhere else to turn. My little girl isn't afraid anymore because she knows Marcus is watching out for everyone." Lily, standing beside her father, beamed with pride. "Daddy, all the neighbors love you." Marcus looked around at the faces of people who had become more than just tenants. They were his community, his purpose, his reason for discovering that his military training could serve a new mission. "I spent 20 years in the Navy protecting people I'd never met," Marcus said quietly. "But protecting people I care about, people who've become family, that means everything." Detective Rodriguez appeared at the back of the room. "The DA wanted me to tell you that your evidence and testimony helped shut down a multi-state operation." Those men won't be threatening families anymore. As the celebration continued around him, Marcus realized he'd found something he thought he'd lost forever. Not just a job, but a calling. Not just a place to live, but a home worth defending. If this story moved you, drop a comment about your favorite part, or if you've ever witnessed someone step up to protect others like Marcus did.